You know, when you look around, the world can seem pretty solid, right? Pretty still. But if you could zoom in way, way down, you'd see something totally different. You'd see that everything, and I mean everything, is in constant motion. It's this silent, invisible dance that secretly runs the whole show, from how our bodies work to the basic laws of physics. So let's pull back the curtain and take a look.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What is this hidden language? How can we possibly decode these tiny, invisible movements to understand the much, much bigger picture? Well, we're going to tackle this by looking at two really fascinating and, at first glance, completely unrelated areas of science.
All right, first up, let's shrink ourselves down to the microscopic world inside our own cells. This world is run by these tiny little machines called proteins. They do basically everything, from carrying oxygen around to making your muscles move. But here's the crazy part. For most of these proteins, we actually have no clue what their specific job is. And here's where it gets tricky. We can map out a protein's entire genetic blueprint, its sequence. We can even figure out its static, 3D shape. But that's kind of like having the full schematic for a car engine, but never ever seeing it turned on. You know what all the parts are, but you still have no idea what the engine actually does. And this is it right here. This is the missing link. To go from just knowing the structure to understanding the function, you have to understand the dynamics. You have to see how it moves. It's not about what a protein is, it's about what it does. All the little wiggles, vibrations, and folds, that's where the secret to its job is hiding. So, how in the world do you capture something that chaotic and complex? Well, scientists have this really cool idea they're working on, creating a unique dynamics fingerprint for every single protein. Let's dig into how this whole new way of looking at these molecules actually works. The whole idea, and it's pretty brilliant, is that if every protein has its own signature way of moving, its own unique dance, then maybe we can record that dance. And if we can read that fingerprint, we might just be able to figure out what its job is without ever seeing it in action. Okay, so how do they actually do it? It's a pretty wild process. First, they use massive supercomputers to simulate the protein's chaotic dance over and over. Then, they use some really smart algorithms to sift through all that data and find the protein's favorite poses. You know, the shapes it likes to hang out in the most. After that, they build a kind of motion map, a model that shows how likely it is to switch from one pose to another. And finally, they take all of that incredibly complex information and boil it down to a simple set of numbers. That's the fingerprint. Now, this is where you see the dream versus the reality. On the left, that's the goal. Each color is a different protein, and you can see its fingerprints all bunched up in a neat little cluster. Super easy to tell them apart. But the image on the right, that's the messy truth of what the data actually looks like. It's noisy, things overlap, and trying to tell one protein's dance from another is incredibly hard. Just how hard is it? Well, this number, it tells the whole story. It turns out that fingerprints from the very same protein are on average only about 11% more similar to each other than they are to fingerprints from a completely different protein. Think about that. That is a tiny, tiny signal hiding in a massive sea of noise. It just shows you what a huge challenge this is. So we've just seen how motion can create purpose. It can give a protein its job. But what about the other side of that coin? What about the forces that actually resist motion? Let's switch gears and talk about friction. Okay, let's pivot. We're going to shrink down even further now, all the way to the atomic scale. We're leaving the dance of life behind and entering the world of the drag of physics, where tiny atoms rub up against each other and create that force we all know. Now, to understand this, scientists often go back to this beautifully simple model from, get this, 1928. It's called the Prandtl-Tomlinson model, and it basically boils friction down to this. Just imagine a single, tiny point being dragged by a spring across a bumpy surface, kind of like an egg carton. And it's amazing what this simple idea can do. It explains where friction even comes from at the atomic level. It explains that jerky stick-slip motion you feel when you try to slide something heavy. And it perfectly predicts the data that comes from these incredible modern tools called atomic force microscopes that can literally feel the bumps of individual atoms on a surface. Okay, so friction between two surfaces. That makes sense. We get it. But what if we take one of those surfaces away? What if we take both of them away and you just have one thing moving through a perfect empty vacuum? Could there still be friction? It feels like a trick question, right? I mean, how can you have drag if there's nothing to drag against? Friction needs contact, doesn't it? This is one of those questions that really pushes our everyday intuition to the breaking point. And the answer from the bizarre world of quantum physics is just mind-bending. It turns out that even the vacuum of space isn't really empty. It's fizzing with these tiny quantum fluctuations. And this quote gets right to it. If things are moving through this empty space, the vacuum itself can create a stress, a drag, a literal friction force. Motion can be resisted by nothing. Wild, right?
So we've just visited two really different worlds, haven't we? We've got this super busy, complex dance of proteins inside a cell, and then we have this strange, ghostly drag that exists in the quantum vacuum. So what on earth could possibly tie these two things together?
Well, they're actually two sides of the exact same coin. They're both part of this epic scientific quest to understand the hidden language of motion. On the one hand, with proteins, we're modeling purposeful motion to figure out the secrets of life. And on the other, with friction, we're modeling resistive motion to figure out the fundamental laws of the universe. And that's really the key takeaway here. The next huge leaps in science probably won't come from things we can see. They'll come from finally understanding and modeling all these invisible movements that secretly shape our world. From the delicate dance that gives a protein its job to the quantum drag that acts on things in empty space, dynamics is the hidden language of reality. Which leaves us with one last really fascinating thought to chew on. If a concept as basic as empty space can hide a secret as strange as quantum friction, what other big ideas are we just taking for granted? What other invisible dances, what other hidden forces are out there shaping our world, just waiting for us to finally learn their language?